Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast, bringing energy matters in an informal setting. Today's pod is recorded at Italia, Milan. Italy is a country rich in renewable resources, but the energy transition has been slowed down by complicated and cumbersome permitting processes, as well as by supply chain constraints. What's more, moves to tax windfall profits at renewable producers or to cap wholesale prices are making investors, developers, as well as utilities nervous. Joining me, Richard Sverrisson, to discuss the greening of Italy is Stefano Cavriani of Ego Energy and Riccardo Rossi of Centrica Energy Trading. A warm welcome to you both.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Richard.
So if I can start with you, Riccardo, you recently moved back to Italy from London. How would you assess Italy's energy transition at the moment?
I think right now Italy is lagging behind to what I believe are its energy resources. I think compared with other countries that are much less sunny and with less wind, I think that Italy can do more. We've seen very strong signals going in the right direction in the last, I'd say, year or so. I wouldn't say changing policies, but speeding up policies towards 2030 targets and some, positive moves towards changing these administrative proceedings. But I think there's still a lot to be done. We're going too slow compared with what we should be going. But I think innovation is coming, and I think we are, we will be experiencing the transition that we all want to see.
Excellent. And how about you, Stefano? What's your verdict?
I would say that Italy, at the end of the end, have to be considered a front runner in the energy sector. Never forget this, because at the beginning of the liberalization of the market, beginning of years 2000s, Italy experienced a super strong investment in new capacity, typically CCGT. At a certain point, also renewable, because the incentives were generous. Green certificates, at a certain moment, the conto energia, the feed-in premium for the photovoltaic. The big mistake was, I would say, around the year 2012, 2013, to significantly reduce the pace of investing in new renewables. Okay, in those years, Italy was really the top market together with Germany. Exactly because we have a lot of sun, we have quite good wind, and we don't have natural resources. So we absolutely need to invest in renewable. The big mistake was that, the big mistake it is that we lost at least 7-8 years. Now there is a sense of emergency about energy, because government finally understood that energy, it is a super strategic sector. Of course, now the situation it is complicated due to the war in Ukraine and and a lot of other points, which are not only the war, because market was tightening already before the war. No? So, really speaking, I would say Italy have all the competencies to strongly deploy this new energy, which is renewable, and it is renewable plus storage. Never forget about storage, about the capability of managing the renewable production. But of course, we have to manage all the points related to the permitting procedures, to law which are somehow complicated. But sincerely, I would not be really pessimistic. On the contrary, I would be optimistic, because Italy have the competencies and have the natural resources related to the renewable. So I would expect a strong increasing in the pace of the transition.
Absolutely. Do you share Stefano's optimism here, Riccardo?
I think I do, but I think we need to see that changing pace, and we've been promised that many times. And I think there are some, we've seen some numbers during the conference today of encouraging numbers about changes compared with last year in terms of megawatt that have been outright or built in solar in particular. But I think we need to keep going that way to see that going. And just to share a little bit the optimistic of Stefano, I think is when we do things, we do it better than many others. But when we do things, that's the thing.
The point is to do it, isn't it? I think
Exactly.
Yeah. But if I can stick with you, Riccardo, and say what we heard is also at the conference some of the obstacles to green growth. Could you highlight some of those?
Well, surely, I believe the administrative proceedings have been quite a key obstacle. What we hear about, authorizations that takes months or not getting even answers from the local competent authorities, or having negative answers for a lot of the requests that have been submitted. I think surely there are some issues that are related to the grid network. I think Stefano touched upon that point. We need to be careful. I've seen a slide from Terna, the TSO in Italy, showing that, for instance, in Sicily, there have been where the peak demand is about 4 gigawatt of electricity in 1 hour, and they receive demand for connection demand to their network for around 40 gigawatt. Of course, that is not manageable, and I think we will have to think fast and implement fast any kind of rule that needs to decide what to put where, because the new resilience plan and the Fit for 55. So they're coming, and we need to be fast in developing those ideas and instruments that will allow us to decide where to do things rather than saying nothing is possible to do. Other obstacles, I'd say, to a certain extent, you could say that credit could be an obstacle, but to be honest, we haven't got to that point, in the sense that I think we stuck at square one here, with the not having a sufficient number of projects that are there. I think that in this journey there will be other issues that we have to manage. It could be credit, it could be about risk sharing across counterparties, because of course the project has a lot of risks, and we need to make sure that these are spread along the value chain in a sensible manner, in a way that is not everything focused on one player or the other. But so far, I'd say it's going to be a long journey, and I think we have the capabilities, we have trading companies, we have all the I believe of the engineerings to be able to do something that will deliver what is needed to deliver.
Excellent. I mean, as far as I can see it, Stefano, there are three main routes in which renewables can come to the market. So you have, fully merchant, so you have no subsidies, they're fully exposed to market prices. You can sign PPAs, or you can participate in auctions, or maybe a combination of some of those elements. What's currently sort of most popular in Italy, or what's currently the most commonly used?
Well, for the new project, what we call FAIR 1, the incentive scheme, which is still in place, it is the best solution, at least from the point of view of the developers. This is simply because the FAIR 1 scheme guarantee a 20 years fixed revenue. Okay, it is not the price of the electricity, because in that case the power plants sell electricity exactly to the market, so typically to the spot market. But there is in place inside the incentive scheme a 2 ways contract for difference, which at the end stabilize the revenue of the power plant, because this financial hedging of the position, it is signed, it is defined with GSE. So at the end, it is defined with the state-owned company. No?
So the GSE is a state-owned agency.
Exactly, it is the state-owned agency which manage all any kind of incentive scheme in the energy sector in Italy. No? The point it is that this tariff, at least with the FAIR 1, which is now in place, it is probably low, because it is around 65 euro per megawatt hour. And this price, it is fixed without any inflation linking for 20 years. So, of course, it is the best solution in order to be bankable, but more and more developers, more and more sponsors are now thinking if it makes worth or not to put in place this tariff, because it is, let me say, only 65 or around 65 for 20 years fixed. So, but the tariff, it is applicable only to onshore wind and industrial areas photovoltaic. So the large amount of other projects, which are typically agricultural lands photovoltaic, are anyway outside of this incentive scheme. So anyway, they need to go merchant. The solution to be totally merchant, so get the spot price as a revenue, it is absolutely not common in Italy, because no Italian bank, at least for what I can see, it is happy to finance a project which is totally merchant. So the solution which they look for, it is typically a long-term PPA, of course, with affordable counterparties, like, of course, Centrica Energy Trading, for example, and maybe also Ego Energy itself. And of course, many other players, because in Italy, again, let me say, there is a strong knowledge of this market. So there are not a super high numbers, but there is quite a number of specialized operators, not only ourselves, of course. At the end of the end, I expect that the market will go more and more towards merchant PPA. Probably it will make sense, not necessary to look for super long PPA, 10 years, 15 years, which in Italy are very complicated due to the volatility, to the cost of the hedging and so on. But probably it would make sense to think about, let's say, shorter term, so 4 years, 5 years, which allow the maximization of the revenue for the generator. And in the same time, allow the buyer, which is, of course, first of all, the off-taker as trader, but also the corporate, if there is a corporate like final off-taker inside the PPA, to manage in a better way a contract which is somehow complicated, but not too much complicated. And I expect that more and more Italian banks, or banks not only from Italy, but which are active in the Italian market, will understand more and more how to manage not only a super long fixed price, 10 years or more, but shorter terms with fixed price. For the future, we expect a new incentive scheme, new tariff, which probably will be exactly the same as FAIR 1. We don't know exactly the amount. It will be defined by the government in the next month, but the mechanism will be the same. So a contract for difference, so a financial hedging signed with the GSE, and the sale of the electricity to the market to typically traders, which provide what we call route to market service.
Is this a view you share as well, then, Riccardo?
Yeah, I would like only to point out who is paying for those. We'd have to remember that these, CFDs, who's paying for them, and of course, is in the end, all consumers, all of us. And this is where I'd say, certainly from the viewpoint of the producers, this still makes sense, and probably, I don't know whether indexation to inflation is going to be added onto that. But I believe that if we want to see market parity, if we want to see a market that is not, drawing on public financial resources, I think there needs to be more efforts, or at least let the market, work, because there are many alternatives, as Stefano was saying, shorter term. That's what I mean by sharing risks across the value chain. Reducing the shorter term means that the bank are more willing to take to lend money to somebody that doesn't have a full certainty for 10 or 20 years. Having a different price structure means that simply the building or the level of development of solar, for instance, is going to be taken. So the profile risk is going to be taken partially as well by the producers, and not just by the off-taker on the other side with a pay-as-produced PPA. So if we share those risks and if we provide effectively options along the way, I think this is certainly the way to go. I'm almost, to a certain extent, afraid that the market could go, too much towards subsidy scheme and keep subsidy scheme in place, because where I have a little view about, other markets like Germany, this is effectively is then keeping the market away from developing structures that are not drawing from public finances, and this means that we're just delaying this rather than getting along with it and sorting the issue now. And I think because we have so many issues in terms of already where to use that public money, I'd say that probably are better places where to use that public money.
And let the market find the best way of developing.
I think so. If there is just the willingness as well to take a bit more risk by anybody and not just by the trading companies.
Exactly. So how does, Centrica is involved in several countries in Europe and probably even beyond. But how do you see Italy compared to its neighbors or to other countries on the continent?
Well, we see it very attractive. On the other side, we see it that, as we say, in the market is flourishing just very recently, and therefore these kind of structures where there is more kind of a view of sharing risks is a bit more difficult to understand or is not yet in place. But I think what we see elsewhere is effectively that people understood with better that effectively PPAs are nothing else, nothing more than ensuring a revenue stream for the producer, and on the other side, ensuring power at a reasonable price as well for consumers on the other side. In the Nordics, where we are very much active, this has been well understood. I know that in that case, probably wind has been more kind of the technology, and therefore baseload PPAs are being more used. But I think that is more understood than it is in Italy, for instance. Another market where very active recently has been Spain, and it's been booming with PPAs in the last few years. And I have to say that we've seen this opening in terms of different structures, different type of lenders, different type of IPPs as well that have different, I would say, risk appetite in a way. And I think this should happen. I think the only thing that could be between us and this is effectively additional intervention from the government or from any government really, with some kind of a strange intervention that could get investors and trading companies to run away simply because they do not want to live with this risk, or just leaving Italian companies to deal with that, and the like of ours than running away because it's too risky compared with other countries.
We've seen Italy's seen certainly some progress in terms of the permitting processes, and it speeded up some of that degrees and the laws there, Stefano. But at the same time, today at the conference, you called the current situation a state of emergency because of this interventions or these kinds of interventions that Riccardo has mentioned. Do you think there's a real threat that companies such as Centrica and others that we saw today and that have been active in Italy and are very interested in see the great potential in the Italian market could pull out?
I would say no, because at the end of course, Centrica itself, but I suppose no. But anyway, any large international company, of course, will evaluate, of course, specifically by itself. But generally, I would say Italian market, it is anyway quite interesting because Italian market, it is a big market. At the end of the end, energy prices are high and will remain high. So generally, I would say there will be always a strong interest in being in this market. Of course, there is now a lot of noise, no, also from the politics, no, what we could define instability from a regulatory point of view. It is sometimes also, let me say, fueled by the noise, no? But at the end of the end, maybe the solution which they find, it is not totally without sense, no? but many times there is a lot of noise, so a lot of confusion. But let me say very, very, very sincerely and very simply, the business, it is so good that I don't expect really that international companies with the good know-how, which have invested in the Italian specific market, which needs specific know-how. So there is a time of entering into this market. I don't expect very much that they will go away. Of course, politics have to be careful about that.
So barring any major disasters, it should continue to flourish.
Exactly.
But we've seen this week as well, Riccardo, Spain introduced a cap on wholesale prices and wholesale gas prices in the power generation. What's your view here? Is this also something that's sort of looming in the background in some countries within Europe?
We know that some countries and some governments are putting pressure on the European Commission to come up with similar measures, but I believe that it is very how to say we have to be careful in doing something like this for two reasons. One is because we don't know what the effect could be on investors, especially. I mean, it's true that as Stefano was saying, that the Italian market is big, the Spanish market is big too. But I've spoken with several developers that as soon as they've seen the first intervention back last year in September in Spain, this was, they decided to say, you know what, not the global players, they would say, well, let's leave Spain for the time being. We come back in 6 months, 9 months, a year. It's not a priority right now. You know, it's just changing priorities in their kind of investment ranking. The other reason is because, and I think Spain is, I believe, right now an example on that, is when you start intervening, then you don't know when you stop. And I think I've counted probably this is the fourth intervention in Spain that has been approved right now with new this kind of a cap on bidding for gas-fired power plants. So I'm already wondering what would be the next one. So, and this is where kind of a people that needs to understand, okay, how it is going to have an implication on my portfolio, my assets, on my day-to-day work, and then understanding, even though we may not pull out, then it may slow down a lot of the activities. Because you have first to understand what's going on onto your existing portfolio before deciding to whether you want to enlarge it, what you want to do with the ongoing negotiations, and so on. So this is, I think, what I believe. It's probably you can't measure it, but it's something that we need to be again careful that it's not going to ruin, the path towards net zero.
We talked a bit earlier as well, Riccardo, about the squeeze on supply chains globally. We're in the middle of an energy crisis. The war in Ukraine is also what's happening in China. Is this also a concern that a lot of projects that have been announced and have been developed could be severely delayed in this part of the world, or any part of the world, really, I suppose?
I think this is a concrete issue, and probably what Stefano was referring before, that we see the market tightening even before the war started in Ukraine. I think was referring to a value chain, and I'd say more in general, the economy was showing signs of increasing, probably at a fast pace, more than the supply chain could say. Look and try to buy a new car. You have to wait for 6 to 12 months. I've been told they're not arriving. They're not producing microchips. There's a lot of things that are happening right now. So I think that this is probably the real and more difficult to the real issue, and the more difficult to be managed at a country level, because in fact, if the administrative processes can be managed by various regions, by the government, and so on, this is going to take longer, but probably it's going to be, when it's going to be sorted, it's going to be all right. But having COVID first, and now this phase, and kind of a change in energy policy towards cutting to zero, basically Russian gas towards Europe, are going to make a kind of a bit of a difference for I'd say for a number of years. I wouldn't say how many because I don't know, but it's not going to be something that is going to last just a couple of weeks, a couple of months. It's going to have some effects, and it's going to be sorted out like it has been in the past, but it's going to take time.
Yeah. A final question, Stefano. Italy is often cited as a country that is going to face the most difficulties in weaning itself off Russian gas. What's your view here? How easy is it going to be to replace it? Are they, is this going to provide extra incentives to speed up the energy transition, or is it going to be, will the government need to go and find alternative supplies and do so quickly?
It will not be easy. We depend on natural gas for more than 40% of all Italian energy consumption, not only electricity. 43%. Germany, which is very much dependent on natural gas, depends for 26. So not half, but we are not far from the half. And 40% of that 43% of global energy consumption, it is natural gas coming from Russia. So in terms of relative dependency on Russian gas, probably Italy, it is among the large industrialized countries, absolutely the most dependent. So the situation, it is absolutely not good, and it will not be easy. We lost, as I was saying before, we made some mistake. We made some mistake in the renewable sector. We made some mistake also in the gas sector, because, for example, 15 years ago, we made so complicated to have the permitting for the regasification plants that some regasification projects was abandoned. So now we don't have enough regasification capacity. Okay, so it is not only a matter of finding new suppliers. The ministries are going to a lot of countries in Africa and so on. It would be anyway not so easy as getting the gas through a pipeline which is already in place, like the gas coming from Russia. But it will be also a matter of regasifying this eventual LNG, which we eventually will buy from other suppliers, because we don't have the regasification. So it is really, really, really a big issue. So, of course, from one side, it is really, really a super big opportunity for the energy transition and for the renewable generation. It is clear. But on the other side, it is a complicated matter for the industry, for the economy in general. So the government have to be very careful to manage this point. And so probably in this moment, of course, it is not on ourselves, because to be in the government, it is a very complicated life and a very complicated role. But if very modestly, I would say it is not a matter of finding a way of reducing eventually what do they call windfall profits. But on the contrary, it is a matter of making the investor investing and do whatever they can. And the money, luckily, it is available and ready to do that, to invest a lot in order to substitute progressively the energy which comes from natural gas and specifically from Russia, substitute it with something else. But personally, I don't think that it will be possible to cancel the natural gas supply coming from Russia. It is too much for Italy. It is too much.
So do you agree with that, Riccardo, that instead of maybe taxing renewable producers on their windfall profits, you should look at other ways to deal with the current energy crisis?
Yes, and I think it needs to be towards various type of infrastructures that we talked about. So it's about new renewable projects, it's about storage, it's about the grid, anything that could incentivize investors to be here, easing the way in which business is done, including taxes, including everything. I think should be the way to go, and not just trying to use the in effect, the energy business or others as an ATM to say, okay, I have a problem now. Let me, press some buttons here and getting some cash back. This didn't happen with the financial crisis. So not sure why it should happen right now with the energy crisis.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining the Montel Weekly Podcast this week.
Thanks to you.
So listeners, you can now follow the podcast on our own Twitter account, aptly named the Montel Weekly Podcast. Please direct message any suggestions, questions, or let us know if you think you have a good idea for a guest on the show. You can also send us an email to podcast@montelnews.com. Lastly, remember to keep up to date with all that's happening in energy markets on Montel News. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you and goodbye.